All right, what is going on, guys? Working into a little bit of hip flexibility here. Gonna work on the front of the hips, get into the psoas, and then get into the back of the hips as well, really counteract that stretch. Overall, just give a lot of love to one of the tightest parts of the entire body, especially for dudes, especially for anybody sitting at a desk all day. And we'll really release these hips and allow the rest of the body to just relax a little bit. So, gonna start with 3 stretches on the front of the hips, and then we'll get into 2 on the back of the hips. For the front stretches, we're really gonna start in a pretty simple stance. We'll just throw, I'm gonna work off the left side here, so we're just gonna throw this right knee and this right foot up. We've got knee over ankle. The left knee is a little bit behind this left hip, so it's not perfectly stacked. And we're gonna start off just by leaning forward. And we're gonna use these hips to throw these hips forward. We're ultimately gonna lean the upper body back a bit. And we'll start out in really the first variation by throwing the hands on the back of the hips here and just gently guiding these hips forward and down. We really want this left hip to remain squared with the front hip. And we'll really begin at like a 70 to 80% range and just use the breath to take us the rest of the way. So we'll hang out here. I'm gonna work through a couple different variations. Depending on your flexibility, you might progress through these now or later, of course. But we'll get into variation 2, and that is gonna be throwing the hands on top of each other and on this front knee. And we're gonna look to send the upper body back a bit. When we send the chest and the back backwards, we're gonna counteract that by throwing those hips a little farther forward. Ease into it. And ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're trying to bring this right hamstring a good bit closer to this front right calf. So as we continue to close that gap, this hip on the left is just opening more and more. All right, so we're into variation 2. Variation 3 is really gonna be taking this left hand and just throwing it all the way up. And when we throw it up here, we're really taking this stretch and we're starting it down in the lower quad, sending it through the upper quad into the hip, into the psoas, and then we're taking it all the way through the oblique and really just extending that entire fascial network and that entire range of motion. All right, so the goal there is to hold that for a couple of minutes. I'm gonna work through the rest of these stretches here for you. We will get into variation 2 of the front side, or stretch 2 of the front side, I guess. And we're gonna start just by throwing the knees to the side of our yoga mat, and we're gonna be sitting on our feet. We have our toes touching back here, and we're sitting right on the heels. Now, what we're gonna do in this pose is really just work to lean back. So we've got our hands back on the floor behind us. This might be a lot for you. That's totally fine. If this is a lot for you, one thing you really want to work on here is pushing those knees down and rotating them in. If this isn't too much for you, we'll then work down to the elbows and we'll continue to throw those knees farther down and farther forward. Now, if you can go all the way back, be my guest. Work my way up. Another way to really get the most out of this is to take the hips and really elevate them and throw them forward. So a lot of times this really helps if you can't get all the way down on your back or even all the way down to your elbows. Just throwing the hips up really just adds in the strength element to this stretch. A lot of times when we want to get the most out of a stretch, it does require some intention with the flexion of the muscle, and that allows the other parts of the muscle to release. So that's what we're working with for stretch number 2. Stretch number 3 is moving a little closer to the wall. And here, I'm gonna work on the right side here. We're gonna start by basically just throwing at one of our knees here, this right knee, very close to the wall, and we're gonna use our hands to gently come up to this kind of squat stance position. So right here It really depends on how flexible you are with how close you'll be able to get your knee to the wall. If it's too tight, if it feels like it's too much, move that knee a little farther away. If it feels like you can do more, get it a little bit closer. But ultimately, we're gonna sit up here, and again, we're gonna throw these hips forward. And one thing that really makes a difference with this hip stretching is the placement of our hips. So if I'm back here and I have my hips tucked back, maybe that tailbone rounded, I'm not getting nearly as much of a stretch as I am when all of a sudden I just do this. If you feel you can go a little bit deeper, you can untuck that foot. I'm gonna have to bend my knee out a little bit. Ooh, I'm tipping, that's okay. Whew. All right into that, holy cow. All right, we can hold that for as long as we'd like. I'm gonna tap out a little bit and we'll get into the back side of the hips. So, very easy back of the hip opener to start. We'll throw our legs in front of us and we're just gonna bend one knee up and we're gonna tuck this foot over. Now, right here, we really just wanna play around with this knee and where we've got this angled and pulled so that we can find really a pressure point and an area of tension that we can really settle into. So a lot of times if I'm pulling this right to my body, I can't really feel it. So I sort of have to play around with where I want this to be. I'll pull this in a little bit more. Ultimately, the knee is headed over towards the left shoulder. That's where you're gonna find really the most release of that back right hip pocket. We'll keep the front foot flexed for a little added stretch, a little added gain for us. And we can hang out here for really as long as we want. This is a really easy stretch to do. Maybe if the TV is on, something like that, you know, we're just kind of chilling, hanging out on the ground. Really an easy one to get into and get a lot of value from. And the next stretch that we're gonna do, we'll add in a third one. So what I'm gonna do first here, I'll save the third one. The third one was gonna be second. That's the best one, but we'll wait for it real quick. The next one that we wanna do here is really just an Indian style seat and a lean forward. The goal here is to really bring your hands all the way down, get your elbows to touch, but that takes a lot of practice and you might not be able to get there just yet. So let's add some blocks, let's add some books, let's add some pillows, really anything to just allow the upper body to relax a little bit. We really want to be intentional here with drawing these hips back, keeping those sit bones down on the ground. And just hanging out here is really going to give us so much value in releasing these hips. All right, that's it for that one, super easy. The next is going to be what's called 90-90, and this is a variation of pigeon. I know myself, I can't get into full pigeon. Full pigeon is really supposed to be like your front leg is horizontal and your back leg is flat and you're releasing over. I can get kind of close, but not all the way there. So a great way to really get the value of that stretch is in this 90-90 position. So right here, I've got both legs at a 90-degree angle. My left thigh is actually parallel here with my right calf. Same with my left calf and my right thigh. And from here, I'm just gonna lean over and kind of like the same way that we really moved around in the pocket of that other back hip stretch, we're gonna do the same here. So, you know, if you wanna lean over a little closer to the right foot, maybe that will help you. Maybe a little bit more directly over the knee, that might help. But ultimately, we're just finding a little pocket here of tension and we're just gonna hang out, sit into it, breathe into it, and hopefully just allow this hip to release a little bit. All right, but pretty easy there. Just a couple of hip openers. Again, front of hip, back of hip, get into the psoas as well. These are really, really easy to just get into and use for a couple minutes a day. Steal some progress when you don't need to do a full yoga video. Good enough to go. I guess we'll move on from here. Thanks for checking it out, and we'll tune in again. Thanks so much.